The newoperalyra company has developed a bit of an obsession with keeping audiences on the edge of their seats. Over the past 3 years, they've produced a Gothic trilogy of operas that feature some of literature's most beloved and feared creatures. First, it was Frankenstein's monster that staggered across the stage. Last year, Dracula swooped in as the star of the show. And this week, it is the Mummy's turn. Andrew Ager is the opera's composer, and Dylan Wright is the bass baritone beneath the mummy rags. Good morning to you both.
Good morning.
Well, it is scary in here. Dylan, I was expecting you to come in totally bandaged up, but I'm happy to see your face, as terrifyingly gruesome as it is. Can you explain for our radio audience what your costume looks like?
We have sort of a traditional linen wrapping around the body, and then quite an elaborate latex and tissue paper covering of the face with some very sunken eyes and black lips and fingernails.
Andrew, how would you describe Dylan's skin condition right now?
I'd say it's pretty serious, but he is 4,000 or so.
That's true. Yeah, actually, like the rags. Where did you get these rags? Because they actually look about 4,000 years old.
Catherine Racine, the costume designer, comes up with the most amazing fabrics and materials. Mm-hmm. And I actually have no idea where she got them. It's amazing.
It is quite amazing. Where did you come up with the idea to... I mean, you were kind of thinking, what monsters do I have left?
Right.
Right? So which ones were you mulling over before you decided on the mummy?
Well, somebody suggested Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, and someone else suggested the werewolf. And I pondered those, but my real motivation in picking the mummy was very simple. Frankenstein, Dracula, and the mummy were the monsters that haunted me when I was a very small child. Mm-hmm. So I thought, I'll just stay with that motivation and finish the trilogy with the mummy.
Yeah? Okay. So how would you describe the mummy in this opera?
Well, in a way, he's in line with the Frankenstein and Dracula figures because he's a noble soul who's completely in the wrong place. And there are bad consequences to that. Like with Frankenstein, the lost child. Dracula, the noble warrior, lived too long. And now the mummy, who's removed from his afterlife.
Ah, okay. That's what you mean when you say he's in completely the wrong place.
Exactly.
Doesn't want to be there. Okay. Mm-hmm. So, Dylan, what did you have to do to tap in to this, noble, but in the wrong place at the wrong time?
I feel like the thing I like most about this sort of period of Gothic romantic horror is it uses a great literary trope of sort of picking an outsider character and using them to show sort of the utter humanity that something even as repulsive or unrelatable as something that's been rotting in a tomb for 4,000 years still has the same core emotions as a living, breathing human.
Would you describe your character as being kind of tortured?
Oh, absolutely. Mm-hmm. He's been resting in a beautiful eternity for thousands of years, and then all of a sudden is wrenched out of it by someone who just decides to take his corpse and ship it off to another country.
I mean, typically one would imagine a mummy kind of walking with his arms straight out in front of them, not saying much beyond, some moans and groans and that kind of thing. But how do you bring this character alive for the opera?
Oh, you'll definitely see some stretched arms and lurching.
And have you been studying movies to kind of get there, or what have you been doing?
Yeah, I quite like Boris Karloff's portrayal in the 1935, I believe, Karl Freund version of The Mummy. Yeah. And he was just such a spectacular character actor, and so I tried to base a lot of my movements off what he did.
Is this your first time, Dylan, doing a horror opera?
Yeah, I think it is.
Okay. And how's it going? I mean, how would you, when you thought about your career and life, did you think that this is where you were going to end up?
I think that the lovely thing about being any sort of performer is that the opportunities kind of throw themselves at you happenstantially and randomly. So part of the fun is just never knowing what's going to come next.
Yes.
And so getting such an interesting and engaging character as this is just a highlight of my career so far, for sure.
What does your mummy skin feel like? Because it looks a little constrictive around your neck.
It's actually much more comfortable than it looks.
Oh,
I must say. It's more comfortable than, say, a prosthetic nose.
As you were saying, you have an amazing costume designer. This is really impressive. If I could describe it, it kind of looks like some bad paper mache and then some really like red eyes around you as well. Yeah. But you were, now you say that this was the first time that you're in a horror opera, but you were actually the understudy for Dracula. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. All right. So how would you compare these two villains and monsters?
I feel like Dracula is a bit of the three villains in Andrew's operas. Dracula is maybe the least sympathetic, whereas I think, both Frankenstein and the Mummy are both completely ripped out of any sort of personal agency and control. So I think it's very easy for the audience to have, at the same time, revulsion, horror, and a deep sympathy for the character.
As we're talking, a little bit of your nose is coming off. Is this just a hazard of the job? Does this happen like and you're in the middle of your performance, I'm thinking? You've done lots of rehearsals. What happens when your skin starts coming off?
Quick fixes backstage in between scenes.
As you do.
Yeah.
Are there any redeeming characters of the Mummy, Andrew?
Absolutely. His nobility. In the third scene of the opera, he's reunited with his pharaoh queen. And we have a beautifully touching duet where he summons her across the sea of time, and she joins him. And we have a wonderful costume for her. And they have a kind of pas de deux, a sort of beautiful duet, love duet, at the end of which, when she departs back into this sort of fog of time, he is heartbroken to find himself where he is. It's very, very sad. In fact, the director was crying during that scene the other day. It brought him to tears.
I was going to say, aren't you the director? No, you're the composer. Okay, all right. Did anything bring you to tears when you were watching?
Well, that actually did too. The same scene brought me to tears because they just perform it so beautifully. It's a great honor as a composer to have your music performed so exquisitely.
It's amazing. The opera is happening at St. Andrew's Presbyterian Church on Kent Street. How are you going to be using that space to reimagine ancient Egypt?
We've constructed a fairly elaborate set. We did it till late last night, incorporating a sarcophagus, which is life-size and completely authentic looking. It was built by a student and his father in Gatineau and loaned to us.
Wow.
Yes, it's an amazing find. We would have had to, I don't know what we would have done without it. We would have had, I don't know. But we have the sarcophagus. We have a very large kind of scary cabinet with hieroglyphics on it, out of which the mummy appears. And we have various sort of mysterious-looking objets to create the interior of a tomb. So it looks and great lighting as well. Lighting.
Were there any fears you had to get over to be in this? Like, are you claustrophobic, Dylan?
Oh, not particularly.
Okay, phew.
Yeah.
That might have been a problem. Yeah, okay.
Had to do one opera that I started suspended 30 feet above the stage in a little box that was the bottom of a balloon, and I had to be in there for about 35 minutes before they lowered me down and I sang my first aria.
Oh, so this is nothing.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Easy in comparison.
Amazing. We are going to find some way to get a picture of you out into the world because it is just extraordinary, your costume. I always appreciate seeing you every year. Now, are you going to do what's after a trilogy?
Well, I'm not sure.
Quadra something?
Yes, it's a word nobody knows, so
That's
I can't
true.
use it.
You know our listeners are writing in right now, but are you going to do a fourth one after this? You don't know.
I'm pondering it.
Okay. Well, let's get through this one first. Nice to see you both. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
That was Andrew Ager, the composer of the New Opera Lyra's latest horror production, The Mummy. And Dylan Wright plays the character of the Mummy. The opera will run at St. Andrew's Presbyterian Church on Friday and Saturday at 7:30 p.m.